on this computer. So thank you everyone for coming today. It is year 3 of Make March Matter. It was longer than March, and we're delighted to have Michael here as our guest speaker. And Michael was introduced by Phil. So thank you very much for recommending and being everybody's patience with this long process. This is our rescheduled session from February, but I think it's a great timing to have it now as we kick off this month's theme, which is Make Members Matter as well. And I really loved what Michael's doing with YouMeWe. So he's going to talk about that a little bit, about the program and maybe how you can get involved, why he's involved, who they are supporting. And then we're going to go through a process that he's using with the youths in the program as well. So it'd be quite experiential. And I think you'll come away learning something about yourself too. So without further ado, because we already started late, so thank you for your patience. Michael, why don't you spend a moment just to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you accepted our invitation? You could be anywhere in the world and you're with us.
Yes. Well, thank you very much for having me. My name is Michael Clemens, and Make March Matter seemed to be a great cause. So I wanted to definitely be here to speak today. So you, me, we feel are the 3 most important words in every language, because everything starts with you, me, and we. And we really started it as a social impact organization more so than a charity, because we feel that the work that we're doing, which is focused on children that live in orphanages in Japan, is really where the hidden assets are for Japan. So in a country where we have more people over 65 per capita in the world and less under 15 per capita in the world, a lot of these kids have been deemed the throwaway children for many years. And I hate that. I think everyone hates that. And so we want to basically work with them, because we feel that naturally with the shrinking population, there has to be more opportunities for them. There has to be people looking to hire native speakers, people looking to hire children that have been raised in a structured environment, etc. So I personally, to go to my story in the beginning, it was a strange thing that happened. My family was in a car accident when I was 6, and we were hit by a fire engine. And when I fell out the back window, they had to take me to hospital. And then my grandmother came to visit wearing a Japanese medallion as a necklace. And so I asked her where she got that. And she said that my grandfather lived in Japan after the war. So honestly, if that accident had never happened, she would have not come to see me, and I would have not seen that necklace that she was wearing. And so from 6, every time I would see her, she would, or see my grandfather rather, he would give me a coin, or he would give me like 1 yen paper notes from Japan that he had collected. So I was always fascinated with coming to Japan. And then my roommate in college convinced me to come here during the bubble, which was euphoric. And then I finished the university in San Francisco and got my first job in Japan, and joked that the bubble popped in the airplane on my way here, because it's never been the same since 1989. But I was fortunate enough to be in banking in the beginning. And it was 2007, I think. A friend of mine asked me to play Santa Claus in one of the orphanages in Hiro. I really, frankly, never thought twice about orphanages. For whatever reason, it just never came into my everyday life. And of course, I agreed. And when I walked in, I couldn't help but notice that most of the children were half Japanese. And so initially, I was incensed, hoping that wasn't the reason that they were in the homes. But the reality is, there's too many stories to generalize. There's economic reasons. There are abuse reasons, there are just numerous reasons, so we can't really generalize. But it was around 2008 that another group had approached me and asked us to fund a summer camp for kids called Designing Artists Academy. So at that time, it was really very much an idea. And it was the idea of artists coming and donating their time and skills to teach kids in the home who can't afford to go to summer camp. And then we funded it in 2008 and 2009. And then eventually I had my own children in 2013 and took a bit of a sabbatical and was running that MPO that it used to be called Living Dreams with the focus on connectivity. So when we started Yimmy, it was really supposed to be focusing on kids 15 and above, where we felt if we could get in to speak with them about financial literacy and career assessment tests at an early age, then we could hopefully have an impact in helping them down their path. I think, the truth of the matter is none of us has to be born. And when you're born into these circumstances, it's not their fault. I mean, they were just born. And I think all children deserve everything, life has to offer. And the only thing I would say is, most people feel sorry for the kids, but I would say not to. I would say, they're getting on with life. And so anybody who supports Yimmy or donations that come in, it's really helping them get on with it. They don't feel sorry for themselves. And so on a very high level, I think a third of them are happy where they are. So these are naturally the kids that we focus on with Yimmy. There's a third who feel they don't even have a voice, so they don't even tell you whether they're happy or not. There's another third that would like to be reunited with their families, right? And so then when I heard that, I thought, well, that's 2/3 of the kids we're not really addressing. And so during COVID, well, before COVID, and I hate to always use that as a reference, but back in 2019, I had about a dozen college students come from the States, and I was able to download a lot of the ideas that were just in my head at the time. And so they helped us put together a lot of projects. But then since then, we've always had interns that are working with us, et cetera. So we're working on a white paper around children's rights in Japan, because it's very much different than other countries. We're working on a social impact bond for a group that's helping retrain abused parents, so that the cost of having a child in care in Japan is about $1 million from 2 to 18. And there's 33,000 children living in care in 600 homes. So the social impact bond idea is to basically structure it so that we could reunite children with their parents after they've been retrained, and then save that projected cost for the government that they can pay back the bondholders, et cetera. And that's still in its fledgling stages, to be honest, but it's just trying to look at solutions to the problems, because I think, it's all about trauma. It's all about childhood trauma, and the fact that when people are experiencing trauma and abuse, it's probably a 3-generational problem. So, for example, when I interviewed some of the abuse, and I never thought twice about the abusive parents. I just thought, well, these kids are better off away from them. I never ever thought about meeting the abusive parents, and I did. And one guy said, look, people used to throw knives at me when I was growing up, so I didn't have a great environment myself. And then when my kids were born, I had struggled to deal with them, and that led to abuse. But then when the boy was taken into care, they diagnosed him with Asperger's and ADHD. So this guy didn't have anybody in his network or his family circle to be educated or knowledgeable enough to make him even think about doing that. And he really felt a sigh of relief that it wasn't that he was a terrible parent, it's just that he had a child with special needs that he needed to care for. So he went on through the training process and became a trainer himself. And so he's reunited with his kids, which is a nice story. But there was another father there who said, my parents were fine to me. It was my high school baseball team that abused me. And then I took that out on my kids, when I had children, and he didn't ever get his children back. So that's kind of the dark stuff that I don't normally talk about, but that's a reality. And I think the other reality is, even though we have a shrinking population in Japan, which will half by 2100, the population in the home somehow stays at 33,000. And you see it, less babies, more elementary school kids, more boys than girls. And so in the sampling that we have, we can see when the kids are coming in. I think that the positives are, when we started in this space, only about 5% of the kids had access to internet. And I think, a large majority of the homes have access to internet now. Not necessarily because of us, but I mean, just in the time that we've been doing this. I think, 33% are 2 grade levels behind their peers because of the trauma and the issues that they dealt with growing up. And when we started in this space, about 9% were going on to university, but now it's a much, much larger number. I think it's closer to maybe 20, 30%. So although Yumi, we was started to focus on kids 15 and above, the reality is there's many kids in the home from 2 to 18. So, you know, if a woman is pregnant in jail, for example, that baby naturally goes from the hospital directly to a baby home, for example, in Shinanamachi. And so the staff care for the child until they're 2. And then Shinanamachi baby home has many different reasons. It could be mom's having second child and can't take care of first child. Mom has cancer and she's being treated, etc. But you know, the beauty of the home is that about 60% of those kids do get reunited with their families. But in Japan, the only part that I really dislike is the fact that at 2, they transition to a more permanent place, and you can see the 2 and the 3-year-olds hanging on to the leg of the new sensei because they're scared they're going to be moved again. And I think that in and of itself is very traumatic. But from 2 to 18, they generally live in the same, you know, group home and environment. The kids who've been taken away from their parents, the parents don't necessarily know where they are. And so, you know, they're very guarded about using the internet and, you know, getting on Twitter or sharing their faces and names, etc. And also, you know, the kids go to normal schools. They you know, have different situations where some parents can come see them because they just economically cannot raise their children. So there's certain jealousy where kids have been given up and other kids have parents visiting them. So that's all managed very strictly to keep kind of animosity down amongst the kids within themselves. So for Yumi, we try to start the kids as young as possible. And so we use a tool that was donated to us called the Cubeto, where we teach the kids how to do coding or get the concept of coding. And the same tool can be used. I really sought it out because one of our kids was deaf, and he was frustrated because if I walked away from him, he thought I was giving up on him and he would storm out of the room. So I thought, well, let's let him learn how to use this, and then he can teach the other younger kids how to use it. And so we brought it in. And so Cubeto is for very young kids, and it uses tiles that are different colors and shapes so that they know exactly, you know, what order to put them in. There's also, you know, very soon, you know, we're not necessarily an English language NPO, but we feel that English is necessary for coding. And so we definitely want to respond to their interests. And so we have a group we work with called Joey that teaches kids with puppets. And she said, my puppets can't speak Japanese, so you have to help them. And so the kids love the puppets. They, you know, they hug them and kiss them. And I couldn't understand why the younger kids spoke English so well. And then I realized that they were being taught by you know, Joey. And so we have, as I mentioned before, many multicultural kids in the homes. And so I had a young boy who had English until he was around 10. And then after he was taken into the home, he was in a purely Japanese environment. So he was losing English. And so I sought out a software that we use called Night Zookeeper, which is that allows them to write stories in English. There's another software called Missions, where we tell them the colors from the zoo. So we need your help to recolor the zoo. So every lesson is around colors or numbers or, you know, words associated with the face, and they get to draw in the picture, but then they draw their picture online in their account. And then, you know, I was pretty regimented about how we were teaching them, but then we introduced them to Scratch. And I saw like the 5 and 6-year-olds who just got it like that. And I thought, I'm really keeping them back by making them wait for these things. So then the kids that really showed promise, you know, we definitely wanted them to be exposed to many different activities. So we have something called Ichigo Jam, which is a $15 motherboard, a $15 monitor and keyboard. The kids can come in at any time and just start typing in the coding sentences. We have, you know, some of these kids, I've known them since they were in high school. And so, you know, at that time, we were dealing with the staff in the homes and working with the kids. But then we saw they graduate high school at 18, and then they go into what I call kind of the halfway house between 18 and 20. And then I find that we're negotiating with the new staff. But it dawned on me that we're probably the only consistent presence in their lives, because the staff rotate, the Ento senseis retire, and so Yumi Wee and the volunteers are probably the only people they've had in their lives consistently from 15, 16, 17, 18. So so we now call them champions. We don't call them orphans because we don't want to further marginalize them. But the kids graduate out of the home, kids, and I don't think we should call them orphans, so we call them ambassadors. So our ambassadors then join us to teach the other kids in the homes that are younger than them. So it's kind of a senpai kohai situation. And I'm proud because another one just landed a job with Sakuda Internet, which he will start in April. He's going to start with a really good salary, actually. Another one was placed with BMW. So the president who owns Nicole BMW had hired children from the homes in the past, and it didn't work out, but he said that didn't deter him from wanting to give them a chance. And the HR department's extremely gracious in the way that they interviewed the kids, and at the same time impressed, because a lot of our kids have certification in Excel and Word and PowerPoint. And they said, I don't think anyone in the finance department has a certification in Excel. So when you build up to really the core focus of us, it was really kids young enough yet old enough to take their future seriously. And so we do something called Money Connection, which is designed by Shinsei Bank. And we sit them down and say, well, how much money do you think you need when you graduate out of the homes? And as I think you probably know, in Japan, you only have to go to school till you're 15. And so we encourage them to continue, through high school at least, and then of course college if possible. And so then we reveal how much it really costs on average for somebody to live in Tokyo. And then we ask them, okay, so how much money or what kind of jobs do you think you can do to earn 200 a month? Or if you wanted to earn 400 a month, how do you think you can do that? And so just very practical exercises about, well, if you wanted to earn $1 million a month, but you only got a job that paid 1,000 yen an hour, how many hours in the month do you have to work to earn that? And so just very practical kind of thought processes for them. But then we quickly turn to an online career assessment test that we give them. And they just answer, it's not perfect science, but they answer a few questions, and then immediately it comes up and shows them possibilities. So you see the kids in the room saying, hey, this says I can be a banker, or hey, this says I can be a teacher. So we try to capture them in that kind of moment of excitement to get them to write down their SMART goals. Like, what do you want to do then in the next 3 months, 6 months, year, 3 years towards this goal? And then that's where the mentors come in. So the mentors can work with them to, I think the reality is when you talk to the ambassadors that leave the home, it doesn't matter that they're getting, toys. It doesn't matter that they're getting these computers. What really matters is when an adult takes that time to spend time with them to make them feel like their lives matter. This is what they remember. This is what's most important. And so it's not easy. And, I have rose-colored glasses on often. This week alone, everyone called in sick, for example. So it's a constant reality that is a term in coaching I was taught by one of the coaches who works with us, learned helplessness. And so it's difficult to shake this off because, they're not forced to go to school, for example. So when they're growing up, they just simply don't go to school. Some of them are on welfare, which is unfortunate, but it's hard for me to pay them as much as they make off welfare, because some of them get like 200,000 yen a month on welfare. Some of them, have self-harming problems. So you can see the scars or, multiple piercings, etc. I said, that's okay at Yumi Wee, but I'm not sure you can go with all these piercings to Sony or other companies, etc. So you need to realize, what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. What language is acceptable and not acceptable in interviews. And so the coach, who's Katie Hurt, she basically did Enneagram testing with the kids, but then afterwards she does one-on-one coaching with them. And so they want to learn more about themselves. So she's helping them try to get over some maybe challenges that they have, etc. So yeah, so I mean, basically, needless to say, the kids graduate and move on. So in 2007, when I started in this space, I mean, those 18-year-olds would be in their 30s now, right? And so it just seems to be this constant supply, and we're constantly looking at, well, I shouldn't say supply, but I mean, there's just so many kids. And so what we're really looking for are the ones that show exceptional promise. What I call them the tech leaders. We don't disregard anybody, but the ones that show exceptional promise, we tend to focus on. So for example, a 9-year-old girl who wrote her own app and presented it to the executives of Microsoft, and everybody fell out of their chair. Her feet couldn't even reach the floor when she was sitting in her chair to learn these things. And I think, it makes, and I tell the kids, I said, I'm aware of your circumstances, but, not many people get to present to executives at Microsoft. Not many people get to go, on field trips to Apple. And so if anything, it should really be also about you guys giving back and you guys helping. So we've also started I call it a collaboratory. It's a collaboration laboratory in the Philippines, and also another one in Ghana. There was a teacher who had written Microsoft Word on the chalkboard with chalk, and that went viral. And then he got all these computers donated, and I friended him on Facebook. But today our teachers are teaching his kids how to make games from scratch. And then those games come back to Japan, and the kids are now going and playing the games. And so it's really kind of a fun, we call it the Earth School, where the kids are teaching each other, and they're sharing information with each other. And I think, for me, in a country with a shrinking population, it's also an interesting opportunity for our kids to be not only in a space that helps the country. For example, if they wanted to be Japanese language instructors online, or if they wanted to learn how to teach the elderly how to use IoT skills and things like this, I think there's a huge opportunity for them there, because simply using like IoT to turn your heater on with your smartphone before you get back to your house, or how to use your smartphone. We gave an IoT device to one of the nuns in St. Francis, and she's thrilled because she can turn her heater on and her lights on without getting out of bed. But so the kids, they're teaching the kids this. And one of our original volunteers, her name is Ma-chan. She's about 86 now. And she gave a TED Talk in 2014 when I met her. And she said, look, I'm 60 and my mother lived to be 100. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So she bought a computer, and then now, she's literally the oldest programmer on earth. She's appeared in Apple. She's appeared, all sorts of forums. And so she gives speeches, or has given speeches, where she says to the kids, go as far as you possibly can on your own. But then if you need that little help to be able to go that step further, look for people that can help you. She said, when I made my own app, I knew I could go this far, but then I sought out teachers that could help me go, the further distance. And so, we're trying to basically show how technology can be kind of this common thread amongst the generations, etc. So, in Japan, for example, it's such a rich and old culture, but there's not a lot of children to pass a lot of the hobbies and customs down to. And so we think digitizing these stories is important. So another project we're working on is Obajan in the Cloud, where we interview people about their life stories, but then we think this is a really interesting skill set for our kids to interview people, edit the film, maybe put in subtitles, and it's going into StoryCorps.com, which backs up to the Library of Congress in the US. And we feel that elderly don't feel anyone's interested in what they have to say, which is not true. And we also feel that they tend to be shy, but once we get them to maybe participate in this, they might be able to be mentors for us, for children who don't have grandparents, right? And so there's kind of a thought process amongst all of it. But I think, the main thing is, in my role as the founder, I play many hats. Of course, everyone loves to be Santa Claus because you come in with the gifts and everybody loves you. But, you know, I'm also the boss. I'm also the dad. I'm also the one who, you know, is kicking them, not literally, but basically saying like, look, you cannot come to work late, period. You cannot, you know, basically not respond to emails. You cannot not accept calendar invitations, so you're not going to last very long, you know, anywhere else. And so there's a lot of training that we do in coaching them. I mean, I grew up on a trading desk, so I tend to be probably a little bit more harsh than most people should be, but it's true. And so I don't think that a lot of the kids coming out of the homes had that one-on-one, you know, focus of what's okay and what's not okay. And that's what we're trying to kind of instill in them. But because we also want to make sure that whomever we're introducing to people to hire them, we don't feel bad about it if it doesn't work out. Because I mean, we've literally got many kids jobs and they just don't show up. And that goes back to that kind of learned helplessness situation. So we were founded in 2018, and almost immediately we had funding from a partner called Colt. And Colt, their mantra is connectivity matters. And then very shortly after that, the Knights in White Lycra asked to meet us because they met us before we were official. And then after we were official, they decided to sponsor us in 2000. Really, at the end of 2018 with the Brits at Lunch Christmas. And then because of COVID, it's like our sponsorship luckily is extended into this year as well, but we've been extremely fortunate to have all of that attention from the donors and the riders and everybody who's participating in the 500-kilometer bike rides, etc. And it's allowed us to scale. So, you know, we were as far north as Iwate and Tohoku and Sendai and Fukushima and Tokyo, but now we're as far south as Nagasaki. We have computers in Kyoto all the way across to Osaka. We have homes now in Nagoya. We have homes in Chiba. We have homes in Yokohama. And we're just continually and always looking for new homes that are interested in receiving computers to start with. But what we're really trying to do is create this network where when companies are looking for kids like them to hire and vice versa, kids are looking for jobs, we can have this extended network, which a lot of us get when we leave our own homes through our families, etc. They don't have it. There's nobody. And so it's alarming. I mean, in the case of, you know, one girl who needed eye surgery, I mean, I was sitting there with her at the hospital, and, you know, I'm not looking, you know, for pats on the back, but I'm always alarmed that I'm the only person that she could have go with her to this. And then you realize this is pretty endemic. And then when I hear they only eat once a day, for example, and when I ask why, they say because we don't have enough money. And so then we're starting a collaboratory with Legacy Japan Foundation and Second Harvest. And so a week from this Saturday, we're going to have the kids come in and give them their 15 kilos of groceries from Second Harvest. And then they complain to me like, well, even if we get the food from Second Harvest, we don't have anything to cook it with. So they've been gone out on their own with no pots and pans. They're constantly going to the convenience store to eat. So the next stage with the foundation is to give them pots and pans and utensils to cook with. The owners of Soul Food restaurant is going to teach them how to cook. She's going to teach them how to shop, because she said, you know, Daiso is not necessarily the cheapest place to get certain things. You're actually cheaper getting them somewhere else. And then it just becomes, you know, more of the kids coming into a community where the community is there to help them. And they need to realize that this is not charity. This is, you know, caring and sharing. And you know, Second Harvest, for example, is an asset of the community. Like when I first got here, I had my 1 yen paper notes from my grandfather. And I didn't know that Golden Week, the banks were closed. So I ate crackers and peanut butter for a week. And years later, I found out those 1 yen notes are worth about 100,000 yen each. So all this time I was quite rich, and I had no idea. I was eating crackers and peanut butter. But by then I'd already given them away to my friends' kids who graduated high school. I'm like, well, you should have these Wan Yin notes because they were passed on to me. And before my own kids were born, I was passing on to you. But don't throw them away and don't leave them in a book as a bookmark because they'll save you. So yeah, so I don't know if anyone has any questions, but I think, you know, the dream for Yumi is that I can teach enough people how to do this, you know, when I'm no longer able to do it. And so what I'm hoping is we're building a community here. We have something called Empower Village. So when they turn 18, they can go online and find services for food or money or jobs or counseling. We work with TEL for the kids that need therapy and counseling, etc. I used to run a hedge fund, and there was this online group called Elborn Village, which was very kind of dumbed down, if you will. It was like a cartoon village where you would go get capital introduction from the little, you know, Keebler elf cottage, etc. So we tried to create Empower Village this way, where they always have a place to come home to. And then the further extension of that is what we call Empower, which is the recruitment arm of helping the kids get these jobs and introduce people to the kids. So some of them, you know, I mean, we're here at Hikari in Shibuya. Some of them just come here because they don't want to be alone while they're doing their homework. Some of them just come here, and when they're eating a lot of the senbei, which are free here, I know they haven't eaten. So did you want to have Uber Eats or something? Yes, please. And so, you know, they get to eat. And so, yeah, I mean, needless to say, it takes a village to raise a child, right? And I think that there's just a lot of things people don't talk about. And I think, you know, as a foreigner in Japan, part of my job or our job is kind of disrupt and say things that maybe people don't want to hear, but then get people together to collectively and culturally solve these problems. And I think that's what I'm hoping we can do in a nice way by really focusing more on their futures and 21st century job skills. And, you know, the truth of the matter is a child born in Japan today will live on average to 107. And so, you know, I don't know how many parents are listening, but I don't know what I'm going to teach my kids who will live to the 22nd century. But I think, you know, you could teach them communication, and you can teach them collaboration, which we're doing a lot of, and you can teach them to be creative with an emphasis on create. And these things will never change, no matter what happens. And so this is kind of the premise of how we operate. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I think I'm looking at the clock and I'm thinking about how we can make this useful for everyone who's in the room. So I know Michael has like a prepared kind of process, but I just want to check like how long that might take to run through.
I think it can go fairly quickly. I mean, if people want to actually do it, I can explain it maybe 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
And then people could get out a piece of paper and a pen and try it for themselves.
And run it. But also then, but maybe to do that, but just before, does anyone have any burning questions they want to handle now? I'm very cautious about asking this question because it would be great to also do the activity too. So anything needs to be clarified, cleared up, apart from, you know, thanks so far, and wow, what an amazing story. And I'm just blown away by all of the different elements. There's so like fingers in so many pies, and which really for me is showing like just the deep complexity and interconnectedness of all of the elements. It's not like, oh, if these kids have Randoseru, then they'll be fine. You know, it's like, and that does help. It's not that doesn't help, but there's also all these other things. Tia Haygood, your hand is raised. Go for it, lady.
Thank you. It's so good to see you again, Michael. And
yes.
There are a lot. I've worked with you before with Yumi, and there are so many things that I didn't know that I'm happy to know now, particularly the partnership that you have with the Legacy Foundation. And I just want to know, where can we donate pots and pans?
Oh, well, to the foundation. I mean, we could talk to Latanya or Sasha and see how we would coordinate that.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, because I mean, everybody, even those successful, you know, sometimes they have their own stories. And so Some of the people, without naming names, were saying, you know, they were homeless, for example. So they remember what it was like. They remember getting a $2.99 Whopper and Coke, and that was their meal for the day. And so now that they're successful, they want to give back in a real way because they've had that experience. And so it's nice to help people get connected with those people who they can help, and more importantly, help them help themselves. Yeah, so and it's March 12th, by the way, if you want
March
to
12th.
be there.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Oh,
Saturday.
Great. Yeah, because I'm inept on the tech and coding side, but I am a massive foodie, and I could at least help in that regard.
Oh, I think, you know, because eventually, you know, the chefs want to teach them how to make hamburger last a week, or, you know, how to do simple things, because a lot of the kids don't know, because the whole time they're in the homes, the food is prepared for them, right?
Yeah.
I think one thing which came clear from what you explained, though, like, it doesn't matter if you're not like the tech person, like everybody's got some skill or some connection or something, because it's a much more holistic than it seems at the beginning. Like, I think you mentioned, you know, Katie is doing that coaching. It's amazing. People making introductions or just opening the doors of their company. Yeah. Like, you don't actually have to have a skill. There you go. Anyway.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, please speak to my point, but Phil's also raised his hand, so I just wanted to alert that as well.
Yeah, I think, you know, real quickly, I feel like my life is a DVD, and I go back to tracks that I forgot about, and I apply things from other parts of my life to today that I never anticipated doing. And I think everyone has skills they don't even realize they have. And it's really people's time more than money we're seeking, because you can't earn that time back, is what I have to say. Phil.
Thanks very much, Michael. Yeah, I hadn't realized there was a connection with Living Dreams. That was Miho Walker's charity, right?
Yes, it was, yeah. So we were funders of them in 2008 and 2009, and then I was the director towards the end, before starting YuMeWe.
Interesting how everything connects back.
Yes.
That was before it was before the Knights before the Knights was founded, I guess.
Yes.
And before I got involved in like the children's charities.
Well, I mean, thanks to you, the British School host us in summer. So we're going to do the artist camp at the British School. We're going to do the artist camp at the British School.
Oh, really? That's fabulous. And will they allow you to use the buses too?
I hope so. We haven't got to that part yet.
Okay.
All right, we'll let you discuss logistics later on, but maybe let's put the 5-minute process. Let's see if we can run through this before we wrap.
Okay, are you able to see my screen? The most popular question in 2020.
Yes, can you hear me? Can you see my screen? Yes, if you can put it into presentation mode would be great.
Just trying to move everybody out of the way there. Okay, so this was something that was taught to me, and I use it to teach the kids that the reality is you have things you like to do and you're good at, and then you have things you don't really want to do and you're not necessarily good at. And I think coming to terms with that is really important for the kids and anyone for that matter. So when I started in my job, our big boss is now running JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, and he has a piece of paper he keeps in his breast pocket that says things owed to me, and on the other side, things owed from me. And then he has a little circle of importance, S word, I don't want to do, but I have to. So, we try to explain to the kids that, it doesn't, no one has to give you the energy to do the things that you like or the things that you're good at. You naturally want to do that and you want to focus all your time on it. But the reality is there are things that you probably don't want to do, but you have to do. And so that's kind of a negative energy that comes into that. So the trick to this exercise is to come to terms with those things. For example, you don't like to go to the dentist. Well, just schedule it in your calendar and treat it like a meeting you're going to. Or you don't want to deal with your bills, or you don't want to deal with a lot of things. Create a checklist, whether you like it or not. Every day you go through this checklist and you just structure the things you don't like to do so that you're not avoiding it, you're not procrastinating. And then that leaves you more time left over to do the things that you like and you enjoy. And so we feel, the best way to do this, and everyone can do this now, if you have a piece of paper and a pen, you just basically create a timeline. And the timeline is essentially from any time in your life until now. It could be from born until now. It could be from high school till now. It could be any point in time. And then the middle line is really the medium line between high point in your life and low point in your life. And so the first time I did this, I was surprised at my own, lifeline. And when I was done, I kind of stepped back and looked at it. And I was also surprised because some people who were doing the exercises at the same time, all their highs and lows were above the medium line. So in my opinion, when you go below the medium line, you're really going through kind of a dark period or kind of a depressing time. And I'm sure you can speak to this better than I can. But when I walked away from my own timeline, I realized all the negative things at the low points were kind of out of my control. My mother passing away, or getting kicked out of university because I didn't have enough money, or, all these things that were kind of out of my control. But then the things that were the positives were the things that were in my control, or I worked towards it, or, I applied to university, I got in, and I got that job, I came to Japan, I did, etc. And so I think once you're done with that, the real question to ask yourself is, well, what is it? And maybe reach out to people you work with, or people you know, or people that you trust to give you feedback on what are the kind of values, or what is it about you that makes you a good person, or what are those things that you need to focus on. So I work with people who are very intelligent, very good at doing certain things, but then they just fall to pieces when it comes to accounting, or they fall to pieces when it comes to details, etc. And so, once you write down the words that they call from a value card, and then score them on, how it makes you feel in your current job or your current life, for that matter. And then, for example, people give me grief about the kind of curtness of my emails or my messages, etc. And so I try to send handwritten notes when it matters, and I try to send proper letters, or I take email off my phone so that when I sit down to do email, I'm sitting down in front of a computer, etc. So I am trying to overcome the negative things that people come back to me about, and that's essentially what this is. So it's essentially resolving those issues, creating a goal to resolve those issues. It's for self-improvement. If your bills are constantly late, or you're constantly avoiding the dentist, etc., it's a way to structure it so that you can get things done. So, Jamie Dimon, he writes to the very last corner of his piece of paper every day. And then when he gets back to his office, he lays it down and he said, here's all the things I owe you. Where are those things that you owe me? And then he attends to the things he needs to, running, JP Morgan, which is a massive job. And then I also feel like life sometimes is being thrown into a swimming pool and you don't know where to go. But if you can swim towards boundaries and you can swim towards some sort of structure in your life, then it helps you kind of get back on track very quickly. But if you don't have any structure and you don't have a process to kind of deal with the things you don't like to do, 1 week can turn into months. And so this is what people should avoid. That goes into mental health issues, et cetera, that come up. And on that note, we've had almost 200 volunteers reach out to us since people started working from home. And so if anyone's listening, we have 200 openings. And so we're really trying to make that connection between the openings and the volunteer positions and the 200 people that are wanting to do more of the things that they're good at and they like to do. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. So, I mean, we do this with the kids because there are a lot of things they don't want to do and they don't like to do, and we try to give them the idea around how to structure it. And so it's rewarding to see some of the ones that are working with the coach because they want to learn more about themselves and want to understand more about why they're doing the things that they're doing, which maybe they never got, that kind of feedback growing up, etc. And I think for your own selves, you might be really interested to see, what your own timeline is telling you. Did anyone draw one while we were talking?
No, I was too busy listening. I gotta do that for my homework, I think.
Yeah.
I love what you said about swimming towards boundaries and swimming towards structure. Like I'd never thought about it in that way of how. I suppose I have thought about it in the way that like discipline and structure is actually freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But thinking how to create those, and how to support other people in creating those structures as well.
Well, I mean, I in a digital world, I can tell very quickly the ones who are analog, no matter how old they are. And so, for the ones that are analog, I make them get a notebook or an agenda and make them write things down. And then every day they have to rewrite the stuff they didn't finish the day before. And I think, in my day, you had an inbox that you could clearly see was full because it was backed up on your desk. Now, when I look at my kids, I said, it has to be a zero inbox policy here. I do not want to see 700 unopened emails and not wondering, or rather wondering why you're not at a meeting. And it's because you didn't see the invitation. And when you get a job, this is not good when your boss is waiting for you at a meeting. So really kind of putting into the context of how to, get organized because it's going to affect you down the road. And this is a safe environment. This is a safe place for you guys to come and learn these skills, etc. But, boundaries, in my opinion, are just what's okay with you and what's not okay with you also. And so also, encouraging them to speak up to me, for example, if there's things they don't like or things that they would like me to improve on, etc. So create that rapport with them.
I love that idea of, like the safe space to practice all of those skills, especially because as you've shared, most of the kids don't have that, the aunt or the uncle or the parent who's going to be like, yeah, you can't not turn up for meetings, or like you can't, they don't have that support system. So being able to be that, have that role, right? Like that eldership role that you just take for granted if you're living in a family. And someone who'll just tell it to you straight as well. I'm sure you're pretty straight with it too.
Yeah, but the kids that simply disappear on me, I write to them and say, look, you're still part of the team. We're here for you when you decide it's time for you to go on to the next step. And then years later, they'll show up again. And, we have a checklist when they come to work with us. I'm like, do you have a debit card? Do you have a bank account? Do you have a passport? Not necessarily for them to travel. I want to know if they know where their Honseki is to be able to create a passport, because some of them have been taken from different parts of the country. And so if I need to get them back to their birthplace to get the documentation they need to make a passport, then we will do that. Do you have a mobile phone? Do you have Wi-Fi? Do you have a laptop? We issue laptops to people. And even if they disappear, I don't ask for that laptop back. Like, that's yours because you need to be connected. But, I also try to explain to them, when you ask for our help, there's movement around you. There's me talking to people and then people talking to people, and there's movement around you trying to help you. And when you make the decision on your own not to show up to the training after you're hired, I have to reverse that movement and calm down and stop all the processes and people that we're trying to help you. So next time you need to make a decision, you need to take into consideration how many people really are around here. And when the kids move out on their own, they're terribly lonely because they've only been in group environments their whole life. And I say to them, like, well, when you're alone in your apartment, look at the wallpaper. Somebody put that up for you. Somebody designed this room. Someone designed this building to make sure it's safe for you. somebody designed your curtains, somebody did that. So there's many, many people that actually contributed to your apartment that you're sitting and lonely about. If you think about that, maybe you won't be so lonely. There's a difference between solitude and loneliness.
Mm.
And I think in their solitude, they can take refuge in the fact that, yeah, and I said, there's people all around you. You know, there's Yumi Wee, there's Mirai no Mori, there's so many NPOs, you know, that are focused on all of you, that you're not alone. So don't fool yourself into thinking that.
Wonderful. Great. I'd love to open the floor again for questions and comments. If you did your timeline or you know your like and goods, please just feel free to unmute and jump in. Does silence mean you're stunned?
Okay, Michael, I'm sorry if I can ask you a question. Nice to meet you. I have a question regarding supplies for these children in the homes. Do you by any chance need orthopedic mattresses?
What we do is we find out the sizes and find out what the supply is, and then we send it out. It depends on how far we can ship them. But for example, we've done that in the past, and we got a van and picked up the mattresses and went around and delivered them to different homes. But yeah, sometimes they do want this.
So if you will have a home, I actually have about 100, something over 100.
Wow.
Almost brand new orthopedic mattresses of the highest quality that were used for the athletes during the Olympics. So
Okay.
Maximum of the use was up to 3 weeks, but mostly not because none of the athletes actually has been there for the whole 3 weeks.
Sure.
And they are a single bed.
Okay. Yeah.
How cool. I'm sleeping in an Olympian's bed.
Yes.
That's actually like, you know, when you think, oh, like a secondhand mattress, but then you go,
no.
I was actually first gonna ship it to our orphanage in Africa, but because due to COVID, the containers prices went tripled to quadrupled, and I cannot justify the about $12,000 shipping alone.
Sure. Well, I definitely will speak with you, and we can put together something that can go out to the homes for them to either contact you directly or
fantastic. Please.
love it.
I would love
champions.
that.
I wouldn't feel lonely or something.
When you said 100 mattresses.
Yeah, well, I don't do anything in small quantities.
Awesome. Any other questions or comments? I think it's really made me go, yeah, what are all the things that we secretly have that we could be build, like skills, interests, anything that is part of building the world, right? And it might be Olympians mattresses, it might be our ability to raise funds, it might be the amazing photos we take, you know, like there's many people. Yeah, I'm just thinking, Christine, you know, the work that you do with intuition and how helpful that can be for trauma, right? Like there's all of these things that in this Make March Matter community that people can do. And if Yumi Wee is not like the choice for you, there's many other places, right, that are looking for those skills as well. So it's a great reminder.
Because with Tia, she helps the kids take pictures with their digital cameras and make calendars, for example. Yeah. And, you know, this generation doesn't have, you know, a tangible photo of themselves, right? And so in the past, we worked with Photohoku who take instant photos of the kids, and then we go over to Photo Cafe and they can frame the photo by themselves. And it's the first time that they've ever had an actual paper photo of themselves, because this generation only has digital. And so that's the same thing with the night zookeeper. We give them certificates with their names. And I was a bit touched because the 20-year-old that just graduated has it in his rooms. So when we Zoom, he's got it on the wall still from when he was 15. So
gorgeous.
It means something. Nice. Yeah.
Wonderful. I see that Phil's hand is raised.
Yes. Well, I drew a graph for myself dating back to 1990.
Okay.
I was kind of alarmed by the fluctuations in it. Sorry, what's the next step once you've established that?
I think to focus on what puts you into the low points and what helped you get out of those low points, and then focusing on that kind of power to come to the realization that, you know, everything's almost a cycle, right? The older you get, the more you can understand that there's cycles. And, you know, I think coming to terms with what it, like in my case, stuff out of my control put me into my low points. But then all the things that I worked hard for, you know, brought me back up again to a high point. So it's really kind of helping those kids see the future down the road. Because I always say to them, you know, you didn't ask to be born, but you have a lot of say in how your life ends up. So let's look at your life backwards. How do you want it to end up? It's like giving them Christmas ornaments, but they've never seen a decorated tree. I'm like, this is what the tree looks like decorated. So let's back up and ask you what kind of ornaments you need in your life to accomplish that life goal, because you can do it. I mean, there's nothing keeping you from doing this. And I think this is why this exercise is important, because it also helps you reflect on how you can pull yourself out. I mean, depression is not a great thing, for example. And most people think that it's just kind of a black blanket pulled up that you can just pull off your head. But it's not. It's basically kind of like this veil of reality where you're seeing things exactly the way they are. But it's really kind of helping them, when they're alone in their rooms and feeling lonely, figure out ways to get themselves out of that. Because I literally have to keep track of all of them. I've got almost 12 ambassadors that we work with, and every day I'm like, where are you? What are you doing? Send me a note, send me a doctor's note, go see somebody to do this. And I've got my own kids. So, I mean, it's a constant effort to make sure they don't go in the doldrums.
I saw an interesting quote. Thanks, yeah. I saw an interesting quote on LinkedIn today by somebody who'd posted that they'd been hit by a car and dragged several meters in the last few days, but they had sort of basically survived unscathed, and putting forward the notion that maybe you can't really be happy unless you've sort of tasted unhappiness. So you don't appreciate the strong aspects in your life until you've sort of been vulnerable and hurt or whatever. So just looking at my gyroscopic timeline, maybe that's the evidence of that too, that the highs don't come until you've had the lows.
I think empathy, right? And a lot of these kids sharing their shame story, and me teaching them the difference between shame and guilt, for example, and teaching them not to share their story with just anybody, and making sure that whomever they confide in as a mentor earns that place in their life, etc. Because you meet someone who's like 30 years old and he wants to get married, but he's an orphan, but he's afraid to tell his wife because if her family finds out, maybe she doesn't want to marry him. And it's just horrible that in his 30s, he's still struggling with his his history. And so we are trying to empower them, and we're trying to explain to them that they are the hidden assets in Japan, and they deserve everything that life has to offer.
Well, thank you so much, Michael. And these hidden assets are so lucky to have you in their lives. And just really thank you for what you do and how giving you are of yourself and your energy. And I hope that everyone who's watched this is just really inspired to think about, maybe you're not going to be texting 12 people and having all of those things going on into your life, but what's like the small thing that you can start and something that you can give back. And I get the feeling, Michael, that also this has really given a lot back to you as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I never, people said, why do you do this? And I never thought about it. But the truth is I was abused growing up. And, we did a speaker series this last year for the staff in the homes, and we learned about ACE, adverse childhood experience. And I think if you score a 4, you're considered a survivor, and I scored a 6, to give you some insight on my own upbringing. But I actually never thought of that going into this. But there was something like innate once I got into this space that pulled me in and made me want to continue to help them in any way that I could. And it's also, you know, a lot of people walk away and feel more grateful for their families also. So I mean, it really goes in many different directions.
Yeah. So maybe that's a brilliant point to end on, that you just don't know what will happen, but let's do something.
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Yeah. So let's take a photo. I'm going to stop the recording. So please everyone say thank you to Michael.